welcome back. Another unboxing today. We've got a Tribus TRI-02. This is a GMT watch, 3 time zone GMT, Cosc certified, retail $1,500 or so. One of my favorite pieces that have come in, certainly from Tribus, but actually probably in the last year. This particular model, like I say, is a TRI-02. So this is the one that really kind of stood out to me whenever I first came upon the Tribus website. You have this nice wooden box. You get a nice outer box as well. If you watch some of the other videos, I kind of show you that. Open it up. We've got the watch inside. There's a little bit of a cheat because I've unwrapped most of this because I couldn't wait. I just wanted to see the finish. Up top then, you've got the warranty card, international warranty. You have the Cosc certification. See that, all the testing. It goes through Cosc stamp. That's pretty cool, right? So as I said, this one retails about $1,500 for a Swiss-made GMT with a Sellita SW330, which is what this has. Cosc certified. Honestly, that's roughly what you should be paying. Now they did have a big sale recently, so I snapped up a load of watches from them. But just to say, at retail, if it's around $1,500, $1,200 to $1,500, I would say that's about right for the specifications and what you're getting in this watch. Is it good value? Well, that's up to you. Do you value Cosc certification? Do you value GMT? Do you value Swiss automatics? Do you like the design? I'm going to talk through a few things about my experience with this watch, why I actually really love it, and why one of these is going to stay with me. I'm not sure which finish. I'm going to decide that soon, but let's get started. All right, so first things first, the design. I kind of think there's probably going to be a polarizing thing, very, very subjective in terms of what you like, don't like. This one really jumped out to me on the Tribus website. Something I haven't seen. There's not a watch that I can pick out that I can say, oh yeah, it looks just like this, right? You've got that kind of vintage style, and maybe looks like a little bit of, Longines, Legend Diver. Not quite though. Also, it's a GMT. The design itself, I think, is really, really nice. It does have that vintage style. It's got the 12, 3, 6, and 9 are a pretty kind of, vintage style font, which I think is really nice. You have this lovely domed sapphire, which is kind of domed but then completely flat up top. So it curves up around the edges, then is totally flat. What I think that does is it creates a beautiful effect around the outside of the dial. And this is where the design, I think, really shines, because the way they've designed the inner rotating bezel, which I'll show you how it works in a moment, is really, really well done, because it creates this beautiful dynamic. Up top, you'll see if I can actually get it visualized there. You get the yellow inner ring with the R markers, right? So up top, you've got the 24, 2, 4, etc. At the very edge, though, you've got a black ring, which you can just see here when I move the watch to a certain angle, right? But that tends to disappear and appear based on the angle that you're at due to the curvature of the dome sapphire. Now that in itself is kind of cool, but what I love even more than that is the opposite happens in the kind of bottom hemisphere of the dial. So instead of the yellow or gold inner R ring, you've got black, and then the outer ring on the bottom is the yellow. So it creates this lovely kind of curved effect where you're not sure if there's like a tapering to it or not. In reality, there's not, but it creates that effect through the curvature of the sapphire, which I think is just beautiful. I think it works fantastically well. It's very unique in look, and that's my favorite bit about the watch. So review over. Only joking, I'm back. Okay, so the design is the first thing you're going to notice. You're either going to love or hate it. It's going to be a subjective thing. I personally love it. It really jumped out to me. As soon as they released these, I was taken by them, and I absolutely love them. The second thing I want to talk about is the build quality and the case design. We'll talk a few specs in a moment, but basically what you're getting here is a 41mm case. Very, very wearable. However, it's 50mm lug to lug, which is, or 50.5mm lug to lug, which is a little bit long for a 41mm case. It's more than you would expect normally. However, another thing I really am taken with this watch is the way the case has been designed. You have this lovely curved lug that really beautifully wraps around the wrist. I'll show you, we'll do a wrist check in a moment. You can kind of see how that looks, but it's been exquisitely well designed, and I don't think people are given the design of the case enough credit. Second to that, then we have beautiful brushing on the case. You've got 316L case. This particular model is what they call the black. It's not black, it's more a gunmetal. And I'll show you it against the steel model so you can kind of see the difference, because it's fairly subtle. When I opened the box, I thought this was the steel model. That's how subtle it is. Certainly not a PVD finish or a DLC finish, which is just pitch black, but a lovely rich deep grey, which I think helps accentuate the brushing on the case, which is really nice. The other thing I like is a mixture of finishes. So you've got the brushed horizontal case sides. You also have this lovely polished bevel edge, which comes up over the lug, wraps in under the top bezel. You can see it there glinting in the light, and carries on down the other bezel. I think that's a really well thought through line kind of curvature. The design of that is beautiful. It works really well. It glints in the light, creates a different dynamic to it. Very pleased with that as well. So next thing, the crowns. You've got the main crown, has the Tribus logo debossed into it. Then you've got an upper crown, which basically runs the inner bezel. And that's got that nice little yellow contrast ring in it, which matches perfectly with the dial and that sort of overall design cue. Then you might be asking, well, how does the whole GMT thing work? How is it a 3 time zone watch? So you've got your normal hours, right? So you've got your minute, hour, and seconds hands. So when you rotate the crown out, it pops, you pull it fully out, and then you can set the time. So say, for instance, it is 9:15, okay? Now you've noticed this GMT hand has just turned there as I rotated the crown. So that is linked to the turning of the minutes and hours, okay? Now how do you set that? Well, this is going to be your first second time zone. So you've got your main time zone with the hour and minute hands. When you push the crown in, when you pop it out to the first setting, this is where you control the GMT hand. So you'll notice on this, you have the inner ring, the bezel, which I'll show you how to rotate in a second. And then on the inside of the dial in the kind of yellow gold, you've got more hour markers. So you've got 24, 2, 4, and so on the inner area. So you can kind of do it one of two ways. You can set the GMT hand to the outer bezel, which is what I normally do, or you can set it to the inner. But we'll do it to the outer and then we'll rotate the bezel, and that's how you set the third time zone. So if it's 9:15 Eastern time here in America, it's going to be 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 in the UK. So what I want to do is I want to start turning this. We actually already had it. So we turn it around to 14, right? Just after 14. There, boom. So that actually was the right time. I'd originally set it. So you set that hour marker. I do it to the outer bezel normally because I don't track three time zones. You could do it to the inner hours like so, because you'll see here it's 14 and 14. Yeah. So if you wanted to set a third time zone, you would take the inner markings as what the first time zone. And then what you would do is you can push the main crown down and get that going. Then the secondary crown is what works the inner bezel. So you'll see here, you can rotate either way, right? So you can create all nice little effects with the light and that kind of stuff. And that's cool. But say you wanted to set, it's 9:15 in the US, it's 2 in the UK, maybe you want to set Eastern Europe or something like that. So what you would do is you could turn the rotating bezel to, say, for instance, we line it up at 2 hours ahead, maybe like, I don't know if Italy is 1 or 2 hours ahead, but say Italy. So 2 hours ahead, boom, right? So suddenly you've got 9:15, your normal time. You've got 2:15, your inner time. And then the outer bezel is showing you 4:15, because the hour marker is basically the GMT hand now for those other 2 time zones. So that's kind of how it works. You could set those 3 time zones, you could have 2 like I normally do, and that's just kind of how you work this. But just on the note of the inner bezel then, I have heard some reports that this is a little bit problematic. I've had 4 of these through here, and they've all operated very consistently and very precisely. And what I will tell you is, having had hundreds of watches through here that have inner bezels which are rotatable, the biggest problem I see with them, and even these are high-end watches retailing at $1,000, I won't name names, but what I've noticed is when you go to lock in the time, when you're happy with that and it's perfectly lined up, see with the 24 and the 12, what happens is when you go to lock it and you turn the crown, the inner bezel turns again. So it maybe like knocks it off a little bit as you lock it, which is a real pain, because then you got to go back and you've kind of got to move it a little bit to the right and then hope it kind of lines up perfectly. That's been the biggest problem I've noticed with any internal rotating bezels. This watch, for me, has not suffered from any of those issues. Perfectly precise. I guess a couple of other features I want to talk about on the watch before I get on to a couple of the negatives. First things first, the height of the watch itself. So we talked about the 41mm case, very, very wearable. 50mm, 50.5mm lug to lug. Normally not wearable, but the design on this is so that it wraps around the wrist really, really well. Now the thickness of this watch is where it's also very impressive. So this watch is 11.79mm thick or tall, height-wise, right? So you see here from top to toe, 11.79mm. Now, for a GMT watch, that is incredibly low profile. Especially, you got Sellita SW330, lots of different, you got different complications in there, for sure. 11.79mm. Now, another of the Tribus watches I reviewed, this is the TRI-05, the pilot's watch, 303 Squadron Special Edition. It's got another exhibition case back. I'll show you this one in a minute. But it's got an exhibition case back, but it has that little disc from the Spitfire in it. So it does drop down. I believe this is like closing in on 14mm height. Wears great on the wrist, no issues at all. Again, because of that lug height, the way they've curved those lugs down, it's just such a good design language to have done that. Very, very smart. But what you'll see is the difference then between the two. So side by side, you'll notice there that the case back on the 303 Squadron does drop down a little bit further. So that's the difference between 11.79mm and I think 14mm or so there on the right. You don't really notice it on the wrist, I will say that. But this is incredibly low profile, so it shows you the engineering that's gone in. It just looks great. To show you, just quickly wrist check, the reason I love this watch and the reason this is probably the most comfortable watch I've had this year, now we're in December, so that's a pretty hefty claim, right? But you see it on the wrist there, 41mm case. I talked about the lugs being pretty long at 50.5mm, but look at the curvature on that, the way it wraps around the wrist perfectly. You see that? It's been superbly well designed for the average wrist. Now, of course, you got a bigger wrist. It's going to kind of sit out a little bit. You got a smaller wrist. Mine's kind of 7.25 inches. A smaller wrist, maybe those lugs overhang a little bit, but not like other watches. Like I got a Steinhardt in recently, GMT, 42mm. I think it was about the same lug length, but it looked like this. It was way out. This has been superbly well designed to wrap around the wrist and make it genuinely the most comfortable watch I've worn this year. So kudos to Tribus for that. Very, very smart design move in that respect, especially with those nice pointy long lugs. I think it's been a really, really well put together case. Now we'll look at the case back. So like I say, this one is powered by the Sellita SW330. Lovely exhibition case back here. Get you a better view of that. Engraved rotor. Nothing too kind of crazy, wacky, fancy, but just very, very nicely put together. The case back itself, you see that kind of gunmetal grey around the outside. It says Swiss made, Cosc certified, chronometer, 15 ATM, stainless steel, sapphire crystal, and that's it. Beautiful case back though. Very, very well put together. So now on to the negatives, okay? Honestly, the only negative I have about this watch, we've covered the design, the proportions, the movement, the functionality of everything. I don't think I've mentioned a single negative yet. The only criticism I have of this watch is the bracelet. So to me, now I'll put a caveat on this at the end, just to kind of qualify it. But to me, at $1,500, I would like a silkier bracelet with a bit more weight to it. So when I say silky, I mean between the links. Normally what I do is like this kind of movement with a watch. I don't have any others here to kind of show, you won't be able to see it anyway, but say on a Tudor, the silkiness of the bracelet and the weight of the bracelet is noticeable, and it's very, very high quality. So to compare price wise, you know, $1,500 retail for this, you're looking at maybe buying as an alternative something like an Oris Aquis, right? Now those bracelets are very, very silky as well. Alpina 4s, very, very silky as well. You can get those sometimes for in and around $500, $600, $700, $800. Super silky bracelets. The bracelet itself is nice. You've got the brushed outer links, the polished center links. It is, I would say this is my caveat to it. I recently had a Bell & Ross Aero Naval chronograph here. That itself is a $5,000 watch, and it had a very similar bracelet to this. So I would say, balancing out all those different factors, it's not unheard of for a brand in the $1,000 to $2,000 range to have a bracelet that isn't quite as silky or as weighty as some of the others within that kind of, you know, price point. Would I like it to be heavier and silkier? Yep, I would. It may get me to wear it. Now, I prefer the look of this on either leather or NATO, so that's the way I'm going to go. But just to make you aware, the bracelet is perfectly passable. I think most people wouldn't notice that it's not quite as amazing as like an Oris Aquis or a Diver 65 in that range, or an Alpina 4, something like that. It's very good, but it's not exceptional. And to me, the rest of the watch, from the design of the case, the brushing, the finishing, the functionality, the case back, to me, the rest of the watch, the sapphire crystal, is exceptional. And so that is a little bit of a letdown. Inside, just to kind of cover some other things, you got the Tribus logo. Let's look at the clasp for a second. So we have this clasp. Now this, again, my other complaint is the clasp. I think this should be a little bit more elegant for the design of the watch. It's a little bit blocky. These are the same types of clasps that you used to get on like an NTH Devil Ray. So you have basically, you have the opener, push pin, very smooth, no complaints on the mechanism whatsoever on this, by the way. Very, very smooth. You've got a lovely brushed finish with the Tribus logo, milled clasp in here. So again, higher quality stuff, all good. The diver's extension then you get is very smooth, no complaints there. I tend not to like the look of that. And I kind of wish that people would kind of brush this instead of having this powdered finish, because it kind of contrasts, and I don't think in a great way. But this here is very smooth. I've had lots of divers extensions which were very, very ratchety, very hard to move. This one is very smooth. So again, very well put together in that respect. Nicely brushed, milled clasp, very smooth opener. You get the Tribus logo on the inside. You know, as this type of clasp, it's probably a 9 out of 10. I wish they had gone for a slightly less angular clasp here. Maybe just make it a little bit more kind of curved, a little bit smoother, a little bit more elegant, I think would have matched the watch better instead of this kind of rugged sort of, you know, clasp here. Oh, one other complaint. No lume. What? Like that is, to me, I don't know why you would make a watch that is designed so well for lume without lume. So none of these markers, none of the 12369, the internal white markers there on the dial, the hand kits even, none of it is loomed. Zero lume, which I find really disappointing because even on the pilot's watch, they loomed the hands and they loomed the outer circular markers. I think again on this, they should have done everything on that dial loomed. At that kind of price point, I don't see why they didn't do it. Does that ruin the watch to me? No, because it's beautifully wearable. The build quality on the head is exceptional. The design, I feel, is fantastic. Knocked it out of the park. I don't see any other negatives with it aside from the bracelet, clasp, and the lume, lack thereof. So then, final point I'll make before we wrap up is the contrast between the color finishes. So when I opened this in the box, I actually thought this was the steel model because I didn't have anything to compare it to. And in the light out in the office, it kind of looked brighter than it otherwise would have done. But then I opened the steel model. So this is the steel versus what they call the black, but I think really is more of a gunmetal finish. So you see that there, the difference in the case. It's fairly subtle. This really is a gunmetal, it's not black. The brushing is the same, everything's identical across them. Bracelets are the same. I prefer the gunmetal to the steel, especially because of the center links being polished. I tend not to like center links being polished, aside from on the Oris Aquis range. But I sort of find this center link that meets the head of the watch to be a little bit cheapy looking sometimes when it is polished. But I prefer it definitely in the gunmetal. So hopefully that just shows you the two different finishes. Again, it's going to be very subjective. You'll see there in the light, you know, there's not a lot of difference. It's not like a PVD or a DLC versus a steel. So I really, really love the richness of this because you do get a little bit of the highlights coming through when the light shines on it. The steel's beautiful as well, no complaints. Looks superb. Love the watch. So really do love the watch. I just want to put that out there. I think the watch is fantastic. I think they could have gone the easy road, the easy path, and they could have just designed a diver or, you know, something really kind of that had been done before, a homage piece, or they could have taken some of the rough design cues from Christopher Ward and they could have just made up a watch because they've experience with that. And I have to applaud Tribus for really taking a stand and doing something completely different. When you look at any other watch, I've got a load more here. I'll do other reviews for them, but they're all very different. None of them are you would pick out and go, oh yeah, that looks just like this other watch. So again, have to applaud them for that. I think they've done a phenomenal job on these. For maybe version 2, I'd love to see a slightly thicker, silkier bracelet. I'd love to see lume. If that's all I can complain about on a watch, I think they've done really, really well because I am a fussy bastard. So there you go. Anyway, this is the TRI-02 by Tribus, GMT 3 time zone Cosc certified. Phenomenal watch, great functionality, great movement, build quality, beautiful proportions. Very, very happy with this. And I hope anybody who is thinking about getting them can take this review for what it's worth. And I have no affiliation with them. We don't provide Tribus through our brand. So I'm just telling you from a collector's standpoint, this is an exceptional watch. Very well put together. Nice, precise bezel, internal bezel. Does not suffer from those problems that I saw other watches with internal bezels suffer from. So for $1,500, I would go for it. If it's less, then you're getting an absolute steal for this specification, and especially because it's Cosc certified. Okay guys, so thank you again for watching. Appreciate your time. Hope you're well. Let me know if you have any questions or queries, thoughts on the watches, on the brand, on the videos. And make sure in the meantime you hit that like button, subscribe button, and the notification bell so I can keep you posted with all the new stuff coming to the channel. And meantime, hope you're well. Yep, take it easy. Have a great one.